Let's go! Who will start at quarterback next season? I'm going to kind of answer it at the end of today's video, but we are going through each and every offensive position. And just like with our defensive depth chart earlier in the week, just because you're a returning starter does not mean you deserve to start. So come into this with an open mind, and of course, if you like deep LSU discussion, subscribe. The easiest position to me is tight end. It's going to be Kole Taylor. 6 catches, 36 yards last year, and a thrown shoe. His blocking will get better. That's obviously something that is hard for a true freshman tight end, blocking SEC athletes week in and week out. But he does have a willingness to block. So Kole Taylor will be the replacement for Eric Gilbert in week 1. However, when we get to wide receivers, there is an asterisk next to Kole Taylor's name. Nick Storrs is also going to be in the discussion. I view him more as a blocking tight end. Then, of course, 2 receiving tight end options, Devonta Lee. Will we ever see him play? I don't know. And then, of course, Jack Bech. I'm not going to spend too much time on the tight ends because we've already done a deep dive on this position. If you want to know more about Jack Bech, you could watch my tight end deep dive down below. But we have got to get to the position that I actually get asked about a lot. The LSU offensive line. Who actually deserves to start? So here we go. I want you off the top of your head to list all 3 of these players right here. Okay, let's see if you can do it within the next 5 seconds. I want to see how big of an LSU fan you are. Now here's the thing. It's okay if you don't remember their names because it's hard to remember an LSU offensive line. P.J. Lonergan was a very good center. Will Blackwell was an exceptional All-American guard. And Alex Hurst overall was a good offensive tackle. Here's the thing. You don't have to remember the names of LSU offensive lines because it's hard. However, it's the unit that matters. How well do you work together? And if you're a believer in chemistry on the LSU offensive line, guess what? You have good news. All 5 of the starters are returning for LSU next season, headlined by Austin Deculus, who was the lone starter who returned from the 2019 season. So, I do believe LSU will trot out the same starting 5 on the offensive line. Left tackle, Dare Rosenthal, Ed Ingram at left guard, Liam Shanahan at center, Chasen Hines at right guard, and Austin Deculus at right tackle. I believe James Craig still believes in this group, even though the season was less than desirable. Now, they did have 4 starters starting new from that 2019 group that won the Joe Moore Award for the nation's best offensive line. But as we've discussed in recent live streams, even that unit had some issues, especially with picking up blitzes, and that carried over to this season. Sometimes the assignments would be missed. Sometimes LSU would do their assignments, but still get beaten up front. And that kind of shows when LSU averaged 3.3 yards per rush, which is outside the top 100. And if you think of the rich history LSU has at running back, that is simply unacceptable. Now look, this unit had a lot going against them. Obviously, 3 different starting quarterbacks. That is the biggest thing. But look, they should have been better than what they were last season. And that's partly why all 5 of them are coming back, because all 5 of them were nowhere close to having a really good NFL draft grade. So should they trot out the same 5 offensive line? I don't think so. I think one name does need to be replaced. Chasen Hines. He is the one offensive lineman that struggled more than the others. So if you do want to replace Chasen Hines, how would you do it? Now, look, Chasen Hines could take this next step, and he could be, the next Will Blackwell or the next Lyle Collins. You never know. Players have unreal leaps. But they also returned Cam Wire, who also did start and played a lot last season out of Gonzales, Louisiana. And that doesn't mean they don't have talented backups. LSU still has these following names. Charles Turner, who played left guard versus Missouri and had varying degrees of success in that game. Thomas Perry is another name, also the name I can't quit hearing enough of from you guys. And I say that ironically because you guys ask me about Cardell Thomas all the time. He's still there. Anthony Bradford's still there. The name to keep an eye on, though, I think the most talented name out of that group is Marcus Dummerville, the 4-star who's coming into year 2 with LSU. He was a late commitment in the class of 2020. It was a huge pickup for LSU there. And then, of course, you have Garrett Dellinger and Kimo McAnioli coming into this class. I'm not a believer in playing true freshman offensive linemen. I think they're more year 2 projects. So you're seeing different variations of the starting LSU offensive line. One thing that's interesting is that our 2 top quarterbacks, one is right-handed and one is left-handed. So Jake Peetz, Mangas, and everyone's going to have to take that into consideration. Also, as Devin pointed out, George Munoz is back, and one of his big additions to the 2019 team was that he was huge in helping LSU pick up blitz patterns. Well, they lost him, and then they got worse at that very thing in 2020. Now, once again, I'm going to link the LSU offensive line versus Texas A&M, where I broke down them in detail, which was still to this day the worst performance I've ever seen from an LSU offensive line. If you want to see that down in detail, you can click the link down below. This unit does have potential, but they're going to have to definitely be better than what they were last year. Like I said, outside of tight end, there is very little clarity for LSU this season, but I do believe John Emery is still the most talented back on this roster. He is a former 5-star for a reason, but health was very inconsistent for him last season, and we're still waiting to see his 5-star ability at a Destrehan High School. Now look, you still have Ty Davis Price. His running back performance against Arkansas was the best out of any of the backs. So those are the 2 clear-cut leaders in the clubhouse. But one thing Kev Falk did last year, which was different than what LSU did in 2019, he did rotate these running backs very heavily. There wasn't really a pattern to it. So we saw other running backs get a lot of carries. You guys know how I feel about Chris Curry. To me, he left a lot of yards out on the field. He is now out of the fray. But there's still 2 more backs there that have a lot of experience from last year. We have Josh Williams and Kevontre Bradford. Of the 2, I was shocked. Josh Williams was probably the better of the 2. Bradford really struggled catching the football out of the backfield, which was something LSU really struggled to do last year. Now, obviously, checkdowns oftentimes come down to chemistry between the quarterback and the running back. And like I said, LSU playing 3 different quarterbacks really hurts the checkdown game. But simply put, none of the running backs, I mean, they really had problems catching the football, period, out of the backfield. And I think that's part of the reason why LSU hit the recruiting trail really hard, with Kev Falk getting 2 top 10 backs in Corey Kiner and Armani Goodwin. If either of those 2 show more consistency catching the football out of the backfield, those 2 are going to play because it adds so much to the LSU offense. Remember this nugget. Ed Orgeron says he wants the 2019 LSU offense down to a T. So if you do that, that means you got to have a running back who could catch the football out of the backfield. The irony of this is Kev Falk, that was his job with the New England Patriots. He's one of the best 3rd down running backs ever. I mean, he was really good at that very thing. So hopefully LSU will take that next step forward in that department. So, as you can see, it's a very complicated position, but it needs to be better. So we move on to wide receiver, and this is also a crowded position group. The one clear-cut starter, obviously, is Kayshon Boutte, but the other 2 I have listed were the 2 that played the most towards the end of the year, Coy Moore and Jeray Jenkins. Of the two, I do like GEAUX a little bit better because he gives you a more vertical option and he is more experienced. GEAUX really plays the game fast, and what I mean by that is when he catches the football, he is really good at getting upfield immediately. And Koy Moore was a very good true freshman wide receiver, especially for someone that a lot of us expected to not play as much as he did last year. Koy Moore just doesn't give you a whole lot vertically now. He was one of the few receivers last year to average less than 10 yards per reception. And as a lot of you know, LSU's receivers, one thing that most of them have always been able to do is really attack the defense vertically. So Koy Moore is a good possession slot receiver who does have the potential to provide something vertically as well. The name that you do need to keep an eye out for out of the backups here, Trey Palmer. He is one of the fastest wide receivers on this team. It's probably a battle between him and Cashapp for the fastest wide receiver. And Trey showed some promise towards the end of the season, and obviously he gives you a lot as a kickoff returner. Then, of course, you have John Trey Kirkland and Alex Adams also coming back. Alex Adams is obviously very interesting, but he only caught one pass last season. And then you have Deion Smith, who of the 5 receivers coming into this 2021 class is the only early enrollee. Then the rest of the wide receivers coming in, Malik Neighbors, BTJ, Chris Hilton, and Jack Bech, who we also listed partially as a tight end. Well, that's going to be a problem. I don't know. We simply don't know. Each one of you guys have a different opinion over who is the best true freshman out of this group. One thing we do know is with Deion Smith early enrolling, it does give him a slight edge in that department, and it does help that he is a really good prospect, as are all these players. Will LSU run more 4 wide receiver sets? I believe that they will, and the reason why, it's because the personnel lines up for this. Thad Moss was a very good piece to the LSU 2019 offense. He was not only a decent receiver, he was really good at run blocking, and him and Joe had a very tight rapport. They were roommates, so that obviously helped out. If Cole Taylor, if he becomes an elite blocker, then it's going to be hard to take him off the field, because in the LSU offense, the tight end sometimes serves as a lead blocker or a key blocker on run plays. But maybe Jake Peetz says, look, I got all these prize thoroughbreds in the stable. Let me see if one of these guys could play a hybrid tight end wide receiver role. We get to the quarterback. And obviously, well, we don't know. We honestly don't know who the quarterback's going to be, but let's just have an adult discussion about it. Look, it's Myles Brennan. He was supposed to take over for Joe Burrow. And what does Myles Brennan do in his first 3 games? Well, he plays well. He breaks a lot of LSU records in his first 3 starts. But there is some context that needs to be added to that. Those were 3 of LSU's weaker defenses to start the season. None of those 3 teams were Alabama or A&M or anyone, really of that ilk. And if you actually go watch Myles Brennan, a lot of his throws were just first read throws. So in other words, it was him tossing the ball to Terrace Marshall and Eric Gilbert on first read. So, that's some important context, but even when you say that, he was still exceptional throwing the football. He is a far better thrower than Max and TJ. And a lot of that is experience, but the bottom line is you look at some of the throws he made against Missouri in particular, they were so on point, so accurate, so in stride, that it was pretty ridiculous. So, if you want a better thrower, obviously you want to go with Myles Brennan. TJ Finley is a very interesting guy. I believe he has the strongest arm out of all 3 of them, but to simplify this the best way I can put it, of the 3 quarterbacks, only one of them made back-breaking turnovers consistently, and that was TJ Finley. Even against his best performance versus South Carolina, he gave up a near pick six to Shreveport native Israel Mukamu. So, look, when you make those mistakes, you don't give your team that much of an opportunity to win. But then again, he wasn't ever supposed to play. It was supposed to be Myles Brennan wire to wire, and TJ showed me some promise, showed me that he could be an SEC starter. Now, we go to Max Johnson, and I keep hearing this. He was 2-0 as a starter. Well, yes, he was 2-0 as a starter. And yes, the Florida game was by far the best quarterback performance of the LSU season. His first start on the road, drastic weather change, his two best running backs get hurt, lots of injuries all throughout the team. Florida was such a heavy favorite, and you win the game. Wow. This guy really has a lot of talent. And if you have a struggling offensive line, it helps out that your quarterback is mobile. The most underrated part of the 2019 LSU team was Joe Burrow's mobility. Now, Max is not the runner Joe was. He's not a dynamic runner. Look, his mobility alone, though, did help out the running game and helped create some holes for a running game that was struggling. And that obviously helps out when it comes to making defensive ends play more honest. So, if you do believe running is a very important thing, Myles Brennan practically gives you nothing. TJ gives you a slightly better running option, but Max Johnson is by far the best runner of the three. So, because of that, I am leaning Max Johnson just a little bit as the LSU starting quarterback. So, that was a lot of information. Obviously, we're going to do more detailed offensive breakdowns. There are some weird statistics that really blew me away regarding this LSU offense. We got a Jake Peetz and DJ Mangas deep dive that we're going to do regarding the 2019 LSU offense, because that is something Ed Orgeron did say. We want to bring back the 2019 LSU offense to a T. So if you're going to do that, well, we have to look at two sets of data. What changed from 2018 to 2019, and what changed from 2019 to 2020, and what needs to change from 2020 back to 2021. We need to look at those data points, and we need to look at those numbers and come to a conclusion to what could help this offense get back to what they did in 2019. And we included a few nuggets in there, but there is another deep dive that I want to do on this subject. It is Power Hour LSU. Boom! Bum, bum, bum. Let's go. What are we having? I think I'm having some pigs in the blanket. They made a bunch of pigs in it. Oh, they're so good too. Put a little Cholula on it. Let's go.